This is the MyCom podcast, where we explore church marketing, communications, and tech for ministry. We love helping churches like yours learn how to effectively find your audience and share your story with the world. We're really glad you're here. I'm John Watson, and this is our wise marketing Jedi, Darby Jones.
Jedi, am I?
I was hoping you'd do that. All right, today we're going to talk about church presentations. Should your church use a projector? Is PowerPoint okay, or is there something better? What's the cost involved with starting up, going from a hymnal to a projector and a screen and all of those different pieces? We're going to cover all of that and a lot more. And honestly, this is relevant stuff for churches of any size. You're not too big or too small of a church to benefit. So please do stick around. Now, Darby, tell us about your experience a little bit working with church multimedia teams. What's that been like for you?
Well, I used to lead worship at my church growing up, and so I have quite a bit of experience with the multimedia team, and when it's great, it really facilitates a hospitable environment for worship. But when it's not, it's really noticeable, and it's been embarrassing. I've invited friends to my church for the first time, and maybe we sing this really powerful worship song, and they're closing their eyes, and you can really sense the Holy Spirit moving, and then the projector guy misses a segue, or leaves the breakfast announcement up a little bit too long, and it's above the choir, and there's this like animated pancake floating above the choir a little bit too long, right. And before he realizes it. And so our church had some problems with that until we started using a flow chart, and we put all of our transitions, and we had 3 columns, and the headers were event, leader, and tech notes. And so each worship element with the leader who facilitated it, and then special instructions really helped each person involved and eliminate a lot of those awkward silences. And
right. Everyone's on the same page together.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Highly recommend a flow chart. In fact, I think we have a MyCom article called Plan Transitions, and create a worship service flow chart that you can look up for more details on that.
Awesome. I remember that article. It was actually really helpful. For me, I've been on a couple different sides of it. 3. I've been the guy running the slideshows, hitting next, and, trying not to miss the cues. And I felt that stress and the tedium, honestly. I've been on the worship teams a lot and seen some cool solutions there. The church that I most recently played bass at, we have 2 big screens on either side of the stage facing the congregation, and then 1 screen up in the back of the church up high near the ceiling that faces the stage, so that the band members can see team-specific notes and things right in line. And it also kind of keeps all of the changes in one place, so that, you don't have that all too often occurrence of the congregation sees one thing on the slide and is singing one set of words, and the worship team is singing a separate set of words, and, that can just get a little bit awkward there.
And sometimes kids in the choir might miss some words or forget some words, so if you have that screen in the back, it really helps.
Yeah, and it also, if you lift it up, if it's not in an awkward place, it can actually help kind of direct the gaze of the team members to kind of not get too distracting for the audience. Like, there's something about a stage presence when you're on a stage. A lot about your gaze and your body language is what is the difference between being a performance and being kind of an act of service in a worship service. So having it in the right spot can really kind of help direct your gaze up and away from directly engaging the eyes of potentially distracted congregants, and kind of up in a worshipful stance. So that can be pretty cool.
Yeah.
But, I've also worn the hat where I've sat in those long elder meetings talking about the little details of the service. And honestly, I'll never forget the somewhat fiery debate of whether or not to ditch our printed bulletins, which had song lyrics right inside in tiny little 2-point font, or to go with all out with a nice digital projector and everything. People have really, really strong opinions about this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people feel a pull toward the kind of traditional side of things, and they want to stick with the hymnals. A lot of people see 21st century technology as you just got to buy in and go all the way out. So we're going to cut through a little bit of that emotional fog today and kind of get down to business and talk a little bit about, I don't know about the facts so much as the best way forward that we see. So I'm pretty excited about this. I really like this topic a lot. And this hit home for me when I think we were dedicating my first child and invited my grandparents to church. And they came and sat in the back with my parents and my wife and everything. And it was a little bit low lit. And we had the bulletins with the little text. And honestly, it's about the size of hymnal print, probably about 8-point font, something like that. And they couldn't see it. The lighting was too dim, and their eyes just weren't what they had used to be. And they couldn't engage in that worship service because any song that they were unfamiliar with, they just couldn't read in the bulletin. So that kind of drove home for me how important this is when it kind of got personal,
Yeah.
So let's start with the most basic question. Should you use a projector in the service or stick with a bulletin or a hymnal? Darby, I'm going to lay all my cards on the table right now and just say, yeah, you should probably be using a projector. And before you object, here's my rationale for that. So first of all, very few millennials can read music compared to prior generations. And honestly, that's kind of one of the main reasons to retain a hymnal, right? Don't get me wrong, as a reluctant millennial, I have to say that more of us should learn to read music and learn to appreciate just the awesome beauty of a church belting out a beautiful song in 3-part harmonies to the glory of God. But in reality, the hymnal notation is going to go pretty largely unused by any younger audience.
And in 15 years, hymnals probably won't be used, if we're honest.
Right. I very much think that is the direction that we're going, and we've got to be honest about that and do what it takes to prepare for that direction.
Right.
Of course, the older generations are going to be more likely to be able to read music and to value that style of singing. But it can grow, like I mentioned, it can grow harder to read that small printed text with age. And honestly, I think that we should do what we can to serve the elders in our congregation by helping them in any way that we can engage with the worship service. So my point is this. To many younger visitors and some older, the hymnal is going to seem like an antiquated and clunky book that is distracting them from worship and meditation. I'm not saying it is antiquated and clunky. I'm saying it can appear that way to some people. So if you care about drawing an age-diverse group of new and old Christians into the fold, I suggest using a projector and some church presentation software to bring in old and new songs in a beautiful and practical, minimally distracting way. That's my thesis.
It's a good thesis. Having projection, like you said earlier, keeps heads up and people... It's just a better atmosphere, I think, if
Right.
people can see each other. And
It encourages expression of worship as well, If you're holding a hymnal, you can't raise your hands
Right.
in response to a song that just moves your heart.
Right. But I will push back a little bit. In certain circumstances, small churches with an older demographic
Yes.
may have a hard time translating hymnal words to the screen. A lot of times their internal database of hymns may not match up with the actual hymn words. And so if they're using a hymn and there's projection at the same time, a lot of times the words don't match up. Maybe if you're getting the words from hymnology.com, it's not going to match up with the hymns. Yeah. And sometimes the grammar is off, which, it's hard to understand meaning when that happens.
Yeah,
and so if you're a small church and you're in this circumstance, it may be better to just use hymns or scrap the hymns altogether and put the hymn words on a projector so that everybody's in sync no matter what.
Yeah.
So either or, but sometimes both doesn't work.
Yes.
But if you have a good source for hymn words and the words are verbatim, the same, then it could work. But
absolutely,
it's all things to keep in mind.
One of my pet peeves in worship is when people replace in the slideshows older, more antiquated words in well-beloved hymns with replacement words. If I'm singing "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God," I want to say "A bulwark never failing." Give me bulwark. Don't replace that with foundation or fortress or whatever word you want to put in its place. It drives me crazy, man.
You want to Google that word and find out what it means and the history behind it.
After church.
Yeah, after church.
After church, I want to Google it. During church, there shall be no Googling.
Okay.
Anyway, you bring up a great point, Darby. If you're a small church that you just can't get the money together or you can't get the volunteers together, don't worry about it, man. We're talking about ideal best practices here, but I understand that you can't always jump into the best kind of ideal hypothetical scenarios. You've got to kind of work your way there. And sometimes, of course, you just need to look at your situation and make the right decision for your church. But don't tune us out just yet. I think there's still something for you here. We're going to talk about a lot of guidelines and concepts that you can apply to a lot of different areas of your worship service execution. So please do stick around. But, talking about that small church budget, that does lead us to kind of the tech stuff. So, Darby, help me out, man. What are we talking about as far as an investment in new hardware to get up and running from scratch?
There's a lot to consider. You have the projector screens or flat panels. There's additional lenses. Professional installation is recommended. Training the multimedia team, computers. There's presentation software. There's annual licensing fees to reproduce copyrighted material.
Yes.
Replacement costs, the bulbs last about 2 years and can cost several $100s actually
That's
to
crazy.
replace. So a lot to consider there.
Wow. So if you had to put like a dollar on it, like get started today, are we talking about $2,000, $200? Do you have a ballpark?
That sounds about right. About $2,000.
$2,000, yeah. So that's a good kind of ballpark estimate if you give you something to save up for, as far as the small church is using hymnals or the large church using hymnals wants to execute a little bit more of a modern approach, a couple $1,000s, and then we're going to talk about maybe some other software ongoing costs as well.
And it's expensive, but if you end up getting used projectors and try and skimp on costs, a lot of times that ends up costing you a lot more in the long run. You might get a projector that's not bright enough. Maybe your room has a little bit of light in it, and the projector is just not bright enough to cut through that light. But there's ways to get around lighting issues. You could have some sliding curtains on the windows to darken things up. But in general, you don't really want to skimp on projector equipment.
When you got to think about the human resource costs as well, right? Pretty much every church suffers from a lack of volunteers and not enough money to go around for full-time staff members, and maintaining used old equipment that's kind of in and out of functionality is just this time drain, this vortex that I don't think anybody really wants to go down.
And if you're a small church and have one guy doing it all, it's also important to maybe get a few volunteers to help plan things out. A worship planning team is a great idea.
Absolutely.
You don't want your worship leader getting burnt out or the pastor who's doing worship to get burnt out. So getting people to select songs in advance and figure out the transitions and what the choir's doing and helping the worship leader do some of that is also crucial.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to touch on that again when it comes to software in just a minute. Speaking of software, the market is just saturated with software options for church-specific presentation software. So I guess the first question then is PowerPoint enough? Should you just use PowerPoint since you probably already have it on your computer or can get it at a nonprofit discount rate? And the answer is up to you. I would say PowerPoint is a well-designed slideshow solution. It is not a church presentation solution. So you're going to miss out on features that could coordinate band team members with the person running the slideshow, miss out on, some of the technical features of being able to do a little bit more technically impressive displays on stage. But again, if you're a small church and you're kind of launching this endeavor, absolutely start with PowerPoint and see how it goes. But pay attention to the pain points of your worship team, right? If your worship leader is saying, hey, I'm frustrated that I'm not able to communicate this to that person, or that we can't all be on the same page here, make note of those things. And as you're shopping for more specific software down the road, if that's something that becomes available in your budget, you can look for things that will address those specific pain points.
PowerPoint will do what you need, but it may just feel like a hack, whereas some of the paid options will feel more intuitive and easy to use. And if you're using PowerPoint, we actually have an article on MyCom called PowerPoint Tools and Timing Techniques for Churches, where we talk about some of these hacks and link off to Microsoft, where you can see these really easy to follow videos. So I recommend finding that, and I'll also put that article link in the description of this podcast.
That's a great alliteration. Tools and timing techniques. Awesome. Yeah, that was a really helpful article, actually, as far as it even gets specific, like here's when to change slides. If you're, 4 words out from the last word on the slide, that's a great time to transition so they can start processing the next set of words.
Right.
There's some great stuff there. So there are free options out there for church presentation software. The two main ones you're going to come across are called OpenSong and OpenLP. So I downloaded and installed and used both of these, and I cannot recommend them. I just can't do it, man. They have got great features. They can be really useful to alleviate some of your pain points, but I believe that they will probably introduce more pain points than they alleviate. Part of that is because it's free. No one's getting paid to develop this. It's open source stuff. And so, like most things open source, the development is kind of crowdsourced rather than made by a specific team with specific goals in mind. It also means that there's not going to be the sort of support you could ever expect from a paid solution. But honestly, maybe most importantly to me is the design. It's not good to look at. It's not pretty. It kind of looks like Windows 3.1 a little bit, if you even remember Windows 3.1. So that to me matters a lot. The software design matters. And I know that might come off a little snooty. You might think, well, you're probably just a graphic designer and you don't like looking at. I am. But so here's the thing. There's this great little article I came across by Margaret Gould Stewart, who blogs on Elegant Tools. And she writes about a guy named Raul Pantaleo, and I'm probably butchering that last name. So I apologize if you're listening, Raul. Maybe I'll just call you Raul. This guy is kind of an architect engineer who designs and implements beautiful, stunningly beautiful, and highly functional healthcare facilities in refugee camps and war-torn zones in places like the Sudan and Sierra Leone. His facilities have won awards, and he's just recognized as being remarkable. And he believes that giving his patients beauty is a gift of equality. That you're showing somebody that you value them by handing them something that's both beautiful and functional. I kind of liken it to, if you've got a guest bedroom in your house. I've got a guest room in my house. It's in the basement. The floor is all scuffed up and kind of nasty because it's a basement. Sump pump in the corner. We got concrete brick walls that are painted some sort of strange soft pumpkin color. It's, but it's a room and it's warm and usually dry and has a bathroom attached and a closet. And that's our guest room. So we put a bed in there and it feels a little bit like a prison cell. It's functional. It's going to keep you warm and dry, again, for the most part. It's got laundry nearby, all the amenities you'd need. But it's not warm. It's not inviting. It doesn't communicate that you value the person that's staying there. Mm-hmm. The other day I was at a friend's house, a beautiful house here in Tennessee that very Southern style, wraparound porch, just really fun to visit. And they have this guest room in their basement that feels like a cottage bed and breakfast. It's just delightful. They have doilies and a Keurig coffee maker in the corner and, a headboard on their bed. Who'd have thought? It's absolutely delightful. It doesn't even have as many amenities as mine does as far as bathroom and laundry and all of that. Mm-hmm. But I would feel more welcomed into their home staying there than in my prison cell downstairs. And so to me, that's kind of the software experience, like especially when the pain point for churches is so often, as we said, getting volunteers, getting that guy to sit in the back and run the slideshow. It's the worship pastor who's frustrated having to communicate changes across multiple platforms and putting it on writing and making sure the slideshow gets updated and all these things. Give those people, those really, really hardworking, easily burnt out volunteers and staff members, give those people a beautiful experience that they'll just delight in. And I'm telling you, your burnout rate will go down. Yeah. You're going to have volunteers who like doing it and who feel valued and who feel like their job is important.
Yeah, putting together this worship presentation feels like an art.
Yes, it is.
It'll really go a long way.
Absolutely. So yeah, getting and keeping volunteers and staff to manage that presentation, I think that's a big deal, and I think great software design is going to help that a lot. So that brings me to the paid options. I know it'd be nice to have a free option, but this is worth it, and I think we might be able to afford it more than you think. So first, let's talk about subscription options. Now, I went out and read a lot of reviews and did a lot of research on well over a dozen different programs that do this. Well, maybe not well over, maybe about a dozen. And what I did was pull out the top 2 subscription model and then the top 2 that you would just purchase in full, based on my opinion and based on the reviews that I read and the feature comparisons. So the first subscription piece of software is called Proclaim. Proclaim is made by Faith Life. Those are the guys that produce Logos Bible software, which we talked about in a previous episode about small group tools. It's going to run you anywhere from $17 a month up to $98 a month, depending on the size of your church, which is actually kind of a nice feature. If you're below 100, you can pay $17 to $20 and get a really nice suite of resources that are going to help you. Proclaim hangs their hat on a full, ever-growing library of really, really well-designed Bible art, seasonal art, animations. It's gorgeous stuff. It also has a really lovely interface that is just pleasant to work with, and it integrates with Logos and the Faith Life apps in really kind of ingenious ways. So, for instance, it actually has push notifications that are geosensitive, if I can use that word. So if you are physically in the church building of a church using Proclaim as their church presentation software, and you use the Logos Bible app to read along with the sermon, the pastor can say, turn your Bibles to John chapter 4, and your Bible app is going to turn to John chapter 4 when you just hit the OK button, because you can sync up your app with Proclaim. It's a really neat feature.
So the person operating the projection is sending this push notification to everybody. They get a little announcement on their phone. They press it, and then they have the verse right there.
Yeah, you can build it right into the flow of your presentation. So you can say, it's just a cue on slide number 8 or whatever that happens to be that will just kind of run automatically right along with the text and whatever elements you have in there.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so they've got some great stuff going. That's Proclaim, run you $17 to $98 a month, depending on size. The second subscription model software is probably my top recommendation. I'm just going to go out there and say that. Get a little spoiler there. This is called Planning Center Online. It has phenomenal reviews. It has a very intuitive and just delightful interface. It's going to cost between $16 a month and $210 a month. So there's a little bit more variation, but it's also geared a little bit more. It's not geared for the large church, but it is better equipped for the large churches. The layout is simple and intuitive, and honestly, the product works like you would actually want it to. Like if you were designing a thing to make all of your pain points go away, they pretty much did that. So changes you make sync up seamlessly, like if you're running the presentation actively and you notice that on the next upcoming slide there's an edit that needs to be made, a typo. You misspelled bulwark. You can make that edit without messing up anything, and it'll just implement on the fly and sync across any devices or any other iPads that are showing the worship leader what to do or whatever. They also have a lot of add-on services for pretty much every function of the church, so I highly recommend checking that out. That's Planning Center Online, $16 to $210 a month, again, depending on church size, so it scales up. So as far as apps that you just can outright buy and own, the first one that I wanted to talk about is called Media Shout. This one's really popular. It's got a unique inline editor tool, so you don't have to leave the preview window to make changes. It integrates beautifully with CCLI, with Planning Center Online, and a lot more. It's got a good-sized media library. Some of the art is a little bit on the lackluster side, in my opinion, a little unoriginal. A picture of a cross on a hill. That can be okay in its place, time and season for all things, of course. Media Shout starts at about $400. So, it goes up from there, I think, to about $700 or $800. It's a one-time purchase, so it's not going to be this ongoing thing, but we can talk about if that's a good thing or a bad thing in a few minutes. The last one I want to bring to you is called Pro Presenter. That's going to be also between $400 and $800, a one-time purchase. It really is emphasizing giant churches, mega churches, huge congregations, giant screens, multiple screens all blended together. It's got the technical capability to do that really well. Some of the other programs also do, but they have emphasized it. So the design as far as a user experience is going to be a lot more keyed in to what you're looking for if that's the size of your church. They have really, really high video output quality, edge blending for merging multiple large screens, and probably the most complex capabilities for video-centric performance. It's a really, really good choice. And honestly, you can't go wrong with any of these four, with Media Shout, Planning Center, Pro Presenter, Proclaim.
I've heard of a few churches transitioning into Pro Presenter and liking the results.
Yeah. And it's just a well-designed It's kind of the Photoshop of church presentation software. It's intricate. It can do a lot of things. There's a bit of a learning curve, but it will do everything you want it to do, and it will do it excellently. But I do think it's worth not just comparing one software to another software, but payment models. The subscription thing is, I don't know if Netflix kind of pioneered it, but since the advent of Netflix and its digital consumption model, everyone's moving to subscription, it seems like. And here's the benefit. The benefit is you get all the latest features whenever they're pushed out. You never have to pay for an upgrade to the next version. So to bring back the Photoshop analogy, if you've been a Photoshop user for 10 years, to get the latest, greatest features, you might be forking out $200, $300, $400, $500 every couple of years. And that starts to really add up. Now, Photoshop actually went to the subscription model, so now you can pay $10, $15, or $20 a month. And yes, over time, you're going to pay more than you might if you just bought that version outright for $600. But you get quality support that never goes away. You get all their latest features, access to their additional media libraries, and that sort of thing. And that's pretty much the way it is with church presentation software. So I know that Proclaim, for instance, is pushing out new Bible art regularly. They do monthly pro media library sets that are season-specific, hand-drawn artwork that's just stunning. They're always fixing little new things that they found or adding a little feature here to make your job easier. So, if you're paying $20 a month for this, what you're paying for is to get the most up-to-date, best thing at all times with ongoing support. So the other thing to consider then is cash flow, right? If you've got $800 lying around, sure, go get ProPresenter. Why not, right? But for the smaller church, it might actually, even though it might add up to be more, it might be worth it for you to fork out $16 a month rather than $800 or $600 in one large lump sum. There are two paradoxical sayings that I think about pretty much all the time in my work. The first one is this: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I try to live by this pretty much any time I'm working in a team setting. It doesn't really have anything to do with what we're talking about. I just really wanted to say it because I think it's cool. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Think about that. The second one is less is more. Simple, right? But that's kind of the point, right? Less is more, really. We're bombarded by just a cacophony of sounds and visuals all day, every day. The lights, noise, billboards, advertisements, commercials on TV, little ads on internet pages. So in a world this chaotic, less really can be more. Minimalism can stand out louder and brighter than busyness and crazy colors and flashing animation. And that's probably the number one concept we want to drive home today as we talk about church presentation software and kind of some tips on how to actually utilize it. So here at MyCom, we've written a good number of articles with a lot of tips on presentations. Darby's mentioned a couple already, but you can distill most of the best tips that we've got to this one central idea. For instance, let's talk about backgrounds, slide backgrounds. Less is more. It's okay to use a black background with white text. Honestly, guys, you have my permission. I know sites are going to tell you you've got to have engaging, beautiful, colorful slide backgrounds and pictures of tulips in springtime and all of that, but you really don't. If you've got a designer on staff, and I mean like a real graphic designer that's his job, have her do it. Sure, and let them play and let them be a designer. But, for the rest of us, I've been a graphic designer, but that's a world that if you're not staying fresh in all the time, you lose your edge a little bit. It's not all intuition. There's a lot of technical stuff going on. So I say for the rest of us, keep it simple. Keep it simple and, choose a dark, appealing color, a nice, bright, bold, large font, and just stick with less is more.
Yeah. Arial, Calibri, Helvetica are great fonts to go with. You don't want, red font on yellow background.
Right.
Or green on red on green.
Please avoid chartreuse at any cost. Also, papyrus font. Don't use it. You don't want to look like a soap store. Also, let's talk about slide transitions for a minute. Now, if you're a PowerPoint user, I'm sure you're familiar with the screen wipes. You're not George Lucas, so there's really no scenario when a Star Wars screen wipe is going to be anything but distracting in a church scenario, unless you have a slide with, C-3PO and R2-D2 as a sermon illustration, then please do use the screen wipe, but only in that scenario. But in general, slide transitions can be, they can come off as a little bit amateur, and it's perfectly acceptable, perfectly preferable, really, to have clean slide breaks. The next slide should just appear with no fanfare.
Yeah.
Because let's minimize distractions. Less is more, right? And like Darby said, we've got to think about the fonts. Arial, Calibri, Helvetica are really great suggestions. Think large fonts. Just jack up that point size to make it really crisp and clear to the people in the back of your auditorium. And think sans serif. So we know serif are those little doohickeys, might be the right word, hanging off the ends of the letters, right?
I think that's a proper word for that.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I think serif is the proper word for that, but doohickeys will suffice. But, when you're reading print, a serif font can aid legibility, if you've got a paper in front of you. But from a distance, sans serif is always the way to go. So avoid the more serif-y fonts. Is that a word, serif-y?
I don't think so.
I'm going to run with it. Avoid the more serif-y fonts. They tend to be thin and harder to read from a distance. Go with the slightly chunkier, more clear, crisp lines of a sans serif like Calibri, which is a personal favorite. And of course, it probably goes without saying, but loopy, curly fonts based on handwriting or cursive are going to be really hard to read. So please avoid them for song lyrics or anything like that. Of course, nearly any font can be used as an accent piece, particularly if the slide's going to be on screen for a longer period of time, so you have time to process what it's saying. So if you want to use the curly, swirly cursive font for your sermon series title, which is left on while you preach, have at it. Just do our eyes a favor and don't use old curly, swirly for song lyrics.
Right.
So speaking of song lyrics, let's apply less is more here too. Even if you can fit 2 verses of a song on one slide, you probably shouldn't. It's going to compromise just the focus that the white space will draw into the text that is on screen. So put as few lines as you can per slide while still following logical song breaks.
One thing to help you remember this general rule of thumb is to think about the 6x6 rule. And it's basically no more than 6 lines on a slide and no more than 6 words per line.
Yes, such a good rule. 6x6. So this is going to minimize the thought that is required for a congregation to follow along. And, this can help them focus on meditating on the words and honestly worshiping in their hearts. So that's a win-win.
2 other resources that I wanted to mention were colorlovers.com, and that's a British website. So it's COLOUR lovers.com.
God save the Queen.
Yeah. But it's if you're putting together a palette for a sermon series and you're using liturgical colors from your United Methodist calendar, you can type in one of those colors on colorlovers.com and it'll bring you back all these complementary palettes that go with that color, and it's created by their users and voted on, and I've found just these amazing, beautiful color palettes there that really help me put my presentations together. So that, and then also creationswap.com.
So good.
Yeah, it's stock photography geared towards the church, and you can sign up and get 3 free images per month, and they have just amazing, beautiful work there. You can, of course, do a subscription and get unlimited per month, but they just have every photo for any kind of biblical illustration that you would need, and they're constantly adding to their catalog. So creationswap.com is great.
When I heard about Creation Swap, I thought, this is going to be corny. I don't know about this, but y'all, it's good. It's really good.
It's pretty fantastic.
It's quality stuff. So you're bringing us to a great point. Yes, there's a place for imagery in a church presentation, right? Particularly behind announcement slides and sermon illustrations, bring up this image on the slide to really emphasize what the pastor's preaching. Is there a place for video, or is it a distraction? Well, I want to talk about 2 places that I've seen video implemented beautifully in a church service. So 1, my current church, when we launch a new sermon series, we record the pastor, whoever's preaching it, recording an intro to this series, an explanation of why we're going down this road and why it matters and what we're going to cover in a really engaging way. And, it's even edited a little bit, put to a little bit of music, but nothing too fancy. And, we play that on the Sunday for the service for maybe 2 or 3 weeks before we launch into that series to get people excited and ready to show up and engaged. But the beauty is you can also put it on your Facebook page, and your church members can share that video out with their followers. If everyone's got 500 followers, your church has got 200 people, that's 200 times 500, and I'm too tired to do math right now, but that's a lot of people that you could reach with a great video about your sermon. So there's one cool idea. Something else that we did that was so moving, at the end of each year, our church supports something called Bombay Teen Challenge, which is an amazing ministry that rescues children and women from brothels in Mumbai. You should look into it. And we do this big fundraising spree at the end of each year, and we send them this big lump sum. And this last year, after we sent our lump sum, the director of this ministry in Mumbai recorded a video for our church and sent it back. And to hear him say, "Dear your church, thank you for this specific gift. This is how we've used this. This is how you've blessed these children, these women." It was so moving to get a video message personalized to us from around the world. It was just the coolest thing. What if we did that locally? What if we supported the other local Methodist churches or whatever your denomination is? What if we sent them a message, good old Paul style, "Grace and peace to you, church down the road. Here's what's happening in our hearts, and here's how we're praying for you." I think that could be a really cool thing and a great way to implement video. Of course, the place for that is probably during an announcement session or just prior to service getting started. You probably don't want to interrupt song flow with something like that necessarily. But I think, video can definitely be used well.
Yeah. The announcement time is a great time to do a mission moment where you highlight your work that you're doing globally. And UMTV has a full-scale production team here at United Methodist Communication, and they've created some very powerful videos that you can use during worship, or you can shoot them yourself like John said. But if you don't have the means to do that, you can check out umc.org/videos for some really great UMTV videos and inspiration. And maybe you're not doing PowerPoint presentation or projecting lyrics up on screen. You should consider having a projector to show videos. It's a really powerful
absolutely
way to inspire people.
One thing I forgot to mention is I heard of a church doing something that they called the Jesus Now Project. And leading up to Easter, what they do is for a month or two, they set up a little space, a little dark room with 1 or 2 strategic lights. And you can go in there and take your phone, turn it in landscape mode, and record a little selfie video of yourself briefly saying what the Lord is doing in your heart and in your life. Just an honest moment of praise or a confession of a troubled spirit or of just a dire circumstance, but to address how the Lord is really dealing with you. And then they all submit that to the church. And then for Easter, the church compiles that into kind of a 5-minute video snapshot of several dozen church members just really living life together in the Spirit. It is a beautiful thing to see, a really fun idea and really easy to implement. You can edit videos like that together with the free software that tends to come on Windows or Mac PCs, whether it's iMovie or Windows Movie Maker. It's not hard to do. So there are some fun ideas for implementing video. Well, Darby, I've had fun. This is, like I said, this is something that's a little bit near and dear to my heart. I really care about this, and I know it's such a pressure point for a lot of churches. So I hope this really blesses you, listener, and helps you guys solve your communication issues in your church around the slideshows or around hymnals, and just kind of figure out a way forward that's going to be really beneficial for everyone. So thank you so much for your time to invest in this podcast. Being a listener, we appreciate you. We value you a lot. And if you have any feedback, stories of how you've implemented presentation software or why you haven't, please send them to us. We would love to see those. And also, if you've got a burning question that you want answered on a podcast or a great idea for a podcast topic, you're our boots on the ground, right? So we want to hear from you and what's really going on in your churches across America and beyond. So shoot us an email, podcast@umcom.org. That's UMCOM, M like monkey.org. And one of us two monkeys will reply, and maybe we'll address your topic on air.
Yeah. And also, we're just starting out. This is a new thing for us. So we need all the social proof we can get. If you can go to umcom.org/MyCom review, that'll take you to iTunes where you can leave us a little good news and help other church leaders get the knowledge that you're getting. So,
and if you're looking for adjective ideas on how to describe our podcast, magnificent, superb, splendid, these come to mind. There's lots of others. So feel free to hit thesaurus.com, type in excellent, and pick any of those synonyms for your description of us. And that's just fine.
They really recommend a lot of great doohickeys.
Yes, doohickeys. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And anyway, thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.